In the remote hollows of eastern Kentucky, where morning mist clings to ancient ridgelines and cell towers still can't penetrate the deepest valleys, local residents speak in hushed tones about the Carmichael twins. Born on a storm-ravaged night in 1952, these identical sisters displayed phenomena that challenged every medical explanation, defied scientific understanding, and left researchers questioning the very nature of human consciousness itself. What makes their case so extraordinary isn't just what they could do, it's what happened when they were separated. Hospital records from 3 different facilities document impossible synchronicities, shared physical sensations across hundreds of miles, and behavioral patterns that suggested something far beyond normal twin telepathy. The final medical report, sealed for over 40 years, contains observations so disturbing that the lead researcher abandoned his career entirely, leaving behind only a cryptic note. Some connections transcend the physical world, and perhaps they should remain unexplored. This isn't just another story about psychic phenomena or unexplained abilities. This is about 2 human beings whose very existence seemed to violate the fundamental laws of biology, consciousness, and reality itself. What you're about to discover will challenge everything you thought you knew about the limits of human connection, the mysteries of genetic identity, and the dark secrets that some families carry through generations. The Carmichael family had lived in the same isolated valley for over a century, maintaining their modest homestead through subsistence farming and occasional work in the coal mines. Neighbors described them as intensely private, emerging from their property only for essential supplies and medical emergencies. The family patriarch, Ezra Carmichael, was known throughout the region for his unusual knowledge of herbal remedies and his ability to predict weather patterns with uncanny accuracy. His wife, Ruth, rarely spoke to outsiders, but those who encountered her noted her piercing blue eyes and the way she seemed to know things about people before they spoke. When Ruth went into labor during a particularly violent thunderstorm on October 13th, the nearest doctor was unreachable due to flooding. The delivery was assisted by a local midwife named Sarah Hensley, whose detailed journal, discovered decades later in her estate, provides the only first-hand account of that night. According to her notes, the birth was complicated by what she described as unnatural synchronization. The twins emerged simultaneously, exactly 23 minutes apart, but their vital signs remained perfectly synchronized throughout the entire delivery. When one twin's heart rate accelerated, the others matched it precisely. When one experienced distress, the other immediately showed identical symptoms. More disturbing were Sarah's observations about the twins' behavior immediately after birth. Unlike typical newborns who cry independently, the Carmichael twins seemed to communicate through a series of coordinated movements and sounds that resembled no normal infant behavior. When separated even briefly for cleaning and examination, both babies would become inconsolable, displaying what Sarah described as violent distress that went beyond normal crying. The moment they were reunited, both would immediately calm, often assuming identical positions and breathing patterns. The midwife's journal contains increasingly troubled entries about the twins' development during her required follow-up visits. At 3 weeks old, they had begun mirroring each other's movements with precision that defied normal infant motor development. If one twin moved her left hand, the other would simultaneously move her right hand in the exact same pattern. When one turned her head, the other would turn in the opposite direction by the same degree. Most unsettling was their feeding behavior. They would only eat when both were present, and they would consume identical amounts down to the smallest measurement. Local physician Dr. Marcus Webb first examined the twins when they were 6 weeks old, documenting what he termed unprecedented physiological synchronization. His medical notes, preserved in the Kentucky State Archives, describe identical heart rates, breathing patterns, and body temperatures that persisted regardless of environmental conditions or individual health status. When one twin developed a mild fever, the other's temperature rose to match within minutes, despite having no exposure to illness. Most remarkably, when Dr. Webb administered a mild pain stimulus to one twin during a routine examination, the other immediately displayed identical stress responses, elevated heart rate, increased breathing, and the specific crying pattern associated with physical discomfort. The twins, named Emma and Ellen, grew into childhood displaying abilities that local residents found increasingly disturbing. By age 3, they had developed what their mother described as mirror speech, a form of communication where they would speak in perfect unison, often completing each other's sentences in ways that suggested shared consciousness rather than simple twin telepathy. Neighbors who visited the Carmichael home reported that the girls would often respond to questions before they were asked, and they seemed to know things about visitors that they couldn't possibly have learned through normal means. The first documented scientific investigation occurred when the twins were 7 years old, conducted by Dr. Eleanor Whitmore, a researcher from the University of Kentucky studying unusual childhood development patterns. Her initial report, published in the Journal of Abnormal Psychology, described the twins as displaying cognitive and physiological synchronization that challenges current understanding of individual consciousness. Dr. Whitmore's tests revealed that the twins could accurately identify objects shown only to their sister, solve puzzles collaboratively without verbal communication, and demonstrate shared sensory experiences that defied logical explanation. More disturbing were the physical manifestations of their connection. When Emma suffered a minor cut on her finger, Ellen would immediately develop a red mark in the identical location, despite having no physical contact with any sharp object. When Ellen experienced stomach discomfort after eating something that disagreed with her, Emma would display identical symptoms within minutes. Dr. Whitmore documented dozens of these incidents, noting that the twins seemed to share not just emotions and thoughts, but actual physical sensations and injuries. The breakthrough that would change everything came during Dr. Whitmore's final visit, when she decided to conduct a separation experiment. The twins had never been apart for more than a few minutes since birth, and their parents had resisted all previous suggestions to separate them for extended periods. However, Dr. Whitmore convinced them that understanding the nature of their connection might help the girls lead more normal lives. The experiment was planned as a simple overnight separation, with Emma staying at home while Ellen was taken to Dr. Whitmore's research facility 20 miles away. The results were catastrophic. Within 30 minutes of separation, both twins began displaying signs of severe psychological distress, Emma, remaining at home, began screaming about things that were happening to Ellen at the facility, correctly describing the color of the walls, the number of windows, and the specific medical equipment in the room where Ellen was being observed. Ellen, at the facility, began crying about her father's presence, describing in detail what he was doing at the family home miles away. Both twins developed identical physical symptoms: rapid heartbeat, elevated blood pressure, and what Dr. Whitmore described as acute separation anxiety beyond any normal psychological response. The experiment was terminated after 6 hours when both twins simultaneously began displaying symptoms that resembled cardiac distress. Medical examinations revealed that their heart rates had become dangerously elevated, and both were experiencing what appeared to be panic attacks that wouldn't respond to standard treatment. The moment they were reunited, all symptoms immediately ceased, and their vital signs returned to normal within minutes. Dr. Whitmore's final report on the Carmichael twins contained observations that would haunt the scientific community for decades. She noted that the twins' connection seemed to transcend normal physical limitations, suggesting what she termed consciousness entanglement that operated independently of known neurological processes. Her recommendations included continued study under controlled conditions, but she also warned that forcing separation might cause permanent psychological or even physical damage to both girls. The twins' story might have remained a local curiosity, if not for a tragic incident that occurred when they were 12 years old. During a family trip to visit relatives in neighboring Virginia, the twins were involved in a car accident that separated them for the first time since Dr. Whitmore's experiment. Emma was thrown from the vehicle and suffered a broken leg, while Ellen remained trapped inside the overturned car with a head injury. Emergency responders noted that Ellen, despite being unconscious, was crying and moving her leg in the exact manner that would indicate a fracture, the same injury her sister had sustained. The hospital records from that night document phenomena that medical professionals still struggle to explain. While Ellen was unconscious and being treated for her head injury, she began speaking in Emma's voice, describing her sister's medical condition and treatment with accuracy that should have been impossible. Meanwhile, Emma, fully conscious and being treated for her broken leg, began displaying symptoms of head trauma identical to her sister's condition. Both twins' vital signs remained synchronized throughout their treatment, despite being in different areas of the hospital and receiving different medical interventions. Dr. James Morrison, the emergency physician who treated both twins that night, later described the experience as the most disturbing medical case of his 30-year career. His notes indicate that the twins seemed to be experiencing each other's injuries simultaneously, making it extremely difficult to assess their individual conditions. When pain medication was administered to one twin, the other would show identical responses to the treatment, despite receiving no medication herself. The incident caught the attention of researchers at Johns Hopkins University who had been studying unusual cases of twin telepathy and shared consciousness. Dr. Patricia Kellerman, a neurologist specializing in consciousness studies, received permission from the Carmichael family to conduct comprehensive tests on the twins. Her research team arrived in Kentucky 6 months after the accident equipped with advanced brain monitoring equipment, and prepared to document what they hoped would be the first scientific proof of genuine psychic phenomena. The results of Dr. Kellerman's initial tests exceeded even her most optimistic expectations. Brain scans revealed that the twins' neural activity was synchronized in ways that defied current understanding of individual consciousness. When one twin was shown a visual stimulus, both twins' brains would show identical activation patterns in the visual cortex. When one twin was asked to solve a mathematical problem, both brains would display the same problem-solving neural pathways simultaneously. Most remarkably, when one twin was placed in a medically induced sleep state, the other would immediately begin showing similar brainwave patterns, despite being fully awake and alert. Dr. Kellerman's research team expanded their investigation to include physical separation experiments, hoping to determine the range and limitations of the twins' connection. Using advanced monitoring equipment, they began with small separations, placing the twins in adjacent rooms while monitoring their vital signs and brain activity. Even with just a wall between them, the twins maintained their synchronized responses to stimuli, suggesting that their connection operated through mechanisms unknown to conventional science. The breakthrough came when Dr. Kellerman decided to test the twins' connection across greater distances. Emma was kept at the family home while Ellen was taken to the university laboratory in Lexington, over 60 miles away. The results challenged everything the research team thought they knew about consciousness and human connection. Despite the distance, the twins continued to display synchronized brain activity, shared sensory experiences, and identical physiological responses to stimuli applied to only one of them. But it was during these extended separation tests that the research team discovered something that would forever change their understanding of the Carmichael twins. Hidden within the synchronized brain patterns and shared experiences was evidence of something far more disturbing than simple twin telepathy. The twins weren't just sharing consciousness, they seemed to be sharing something that transcended individual identity entirely. The implications of this discovery would soon lead to revelations about the Carmichael family history that had been carefully hidden for generations, secrets that suggested the twins' abilities might not be unique to them, but rather the latest manifestation of something that had been passed down through their bloodline for over a century. What Dr. Kellerman's team was about to uncover would challenge not just scientific understanding, but the very nature of human identity itself. Dr. Kellerman's team began noticing anomalies in their data that went beyond synchronized brain activity. During one particularly intensive monitoring session, while Emma remained at the family home and Ellen was under observation at the university, the research equipment began recording what they initially dismissed as technical malfunctions. Both twins' brain scans showed identical neural firing patterns, but embedded within these patterns were additional signals, electrical activity that seemed to originate from neither twin individually. The lead technician, Robert Chen, spent weeks analyzing the data before presenting his findings to Dr. Kellerman. The mysterious neural signals appeared to be coming from what he described as a third consciousness, somehow connected to both twins simultaneously. This additional presence wasn't simply an overlap of their shared awareness. It displayed its own distinct patterns, responses, and what could only be described as intentional behavior. Dr. Kellerman initially rejected Chen's conclusions, assuming the anomalous readings resulted from equipment interference or data corruption. However, as testing continued, the pattern became undeniable. The mysterious third signal would become more active during periods of stress or separation, almost as if it were working to maintain the connection between the twins. When the girls were calm and together, this additional presence would fade to barely detectable levels, but it never disappeared entirely. The research team decided to investigate the Carmichael family history more thoroughly, hoping to find some genetic or environmental explanation for the twins' extraordinary abilities. What they discovered in the county records and local archives painted a picture far more disturbing than they had anticipated. The Carmichael family had been keeping secrets for generations, and the twins' abilities were just the latest chapter in a story that stretched back over a century. Marriage records from the 1800s revealed that the Carmichael family had consistently practiced intermarriage with three other local families, the Hensleys, the Webbs, and the Morrisons. These same surnames appeared repeatedly in connection with unexplained phenomena throughout the region's history. Local newspaper archives contained dozens of references to unusual incidents involving members of these families. Children who could predict deaths days before they occurred, individuals who seemed to know things happening miles away, and multiple documented cases of twins or siblings displaying supernatural connections. The most disturbing discovery came from the personal papers of Dr. Amos Hensley, a local physician who had practiced in the area during the 1920s. His private journal, discovered in the basement of an abandoned clinic, contained detailed observations about what he termed the bloodline manifestation. According to his notes, the intermarriage between the four families had been intentional, designed to preserve and strengthen what he described as inherited capabilities that transcend normal human limitations. Dr. Hensley's journal revealed that the Carmichael twins were not the first to display such extraordinary abilities. In 1923, he had documented a pair of brothers from the Morrison family who could communicate across vast distances and shared physical sensations. In 1931, twin sisters from the Webb family had demonstrated the ability to experience each other's dreams and predict future events with disturbing accuracy. Each generation seemed to produce at least one set of twins or siblings with abilities that defied scientific explanation. But Dr. Hensley's most chilling observation concerned what he called the presence. His journal entries described a recurring phenomenon where individuals with the strongest inherited abilities would report feeling watched or guided by something they couldn't identify. Children would speak of an invisible companion that helped them understand things beyond their years. Adults would describe dreams where they received a knowledge or instructions from a source they couldn't name but instinctively trusted. Dr. Kellerman's research team realized that the mysterious third consciousness they had detected in the twins' brain scans might be connected to this historical presence. The additional neural signals weren't random anomalies. They represented something that had been influencing the Carmichael bloodline for generations. The twins hadn't developed their abilities independently. They were accessing something that had been passed down through their family like a genetic inheritance, but one that operated outside the normal boundaries of biology. The implications of this discovery led Dr. Kellerman to conduct more invasive testing, hoping to understand the nature of this inherited presence. Using advanced neural mapping techniques, her team began monitoring the twins during various activities, paying particular attention to moments when the mysterious third consciousness became most active. What they found challenged their understanding of individual identity and consciousness itself. The presence seemed to emerge most strongly when the twins were solving complex problems or facing emotional stress. During these moments, their synchronized brain activity would be joined by the additional neural patterns, creating what Dr. Kellerman described as a hybrid consciousness that incorporated elements from both twins plus something entirely separate. The twins would demonstrate knowledge and abilities that neither possessed individually, as if they were accessing information from an external source. More disturbing was the discovery that the present seemed to have its own agenda. During separation experiments, the mysterious consciousness would become increasingly active, apparently working to maintain the connection between the twins despite physical distance. When researchers attempted to interfere with this process using various electromagnetic fields and neural disruption techniques, the presence would respond with what could only be described as resistance, actively counteracting their efforts to break the twins' connection. Dr. Kellerman's team began to suspect that the Carmichael twins weren't just experiencing unusual telepathic abilities, they were serving as conduits for something that had been using their family line for generations. The presence wasn't simply observing or guiding, it was actively participating in their consciousness, contributing to their shared experiences and extraordinary capabilities. The research took a darker turn when Dr. Kellerman decided to investigate the long-term effects of the presence on previous generations. Medical records from the early 1900s revealed that individuals from the 4 interconnected families often experienced rapid mental deterioration after age 40. Many were committed to state institutions with diagnoses of dementia or psychosis, but their symptoms didn't match typical mental illness patterns. Instead, they seemed to be overwhelmed by sensory input and knowledge that their minds couldn't process. Dr. Hensley's journal contained a particularly disturbing entry about his own grandfather, who had married into the Carmichael line in 1887. According to the account, the elderly man had begun speaking in voices that weren't his own, demonstrating knowledge of events that occurred before his birth and claiming to remember experiences from other people's lives. His condition deteriorated rapidly until he could no longer distinguish between his own memories and those that seemed to come from external sources. The pattern was consistent across multiple generations. Individuals who displayed the strongest inherited abilities would eventually be consumed by them, losing their individual identity as they became overwhelmed by the presence that had been guiding their family for decades. Dr. Kellerman realized that the Carmichael twins might be following the same trajectory, and their extraordinary abilities could ultimately destroy their capacity for independent thought and existence. This discovery led to a crucial decision about the direction of the research. Dr. Kellerman faced an ethical dilemma that would define the rest of her career. Should she continue studying the twins, potentially exposing them to the same fate that had befallen their ancestors? Or should she find a way to sever their connection to the presence, possibly saving their sanity but destroying their extraordinary abilities in the process? The answer came from an unexpected source. Ruth Carmichael, the twins' mother, had been quietly observing the research from the beginning. During a private meeting with Dr. Kellerman, she revealed that the family had been aware of the presence for generations. They had carefully maintained the bloodline connections, not to preserve their abilities, but to prevent something far worse from happening. According to Ruth, the presence wasn't just using their family as conduits, it was trapped within their bloodline, unable to fully manifest in the physical world without a suitable host. The twins' extraordinary abilities weren't gifts, they were symptoms of an ongoing struggle between the presence and their human consciousness. The family had been serving as a prison for something that had been trying to break free for over a century. Ruth's revelation changed everything Dr. Kellerman thought she knew about the case. The twins weren't just experiencing unusual telepathic phenomena, they were the latest generation in a family that had been containing something that posed a threat to far more than just their individual sanity. The presence that had been detected in their brain scans wasn't trying to help or guide them. It was attempting to use them as a gateway to escape the limitations that had bound it for generations. The research team now faced a terrifying possibility. If the presence succeeded in fully manifesting through the twins, it might no longer be contained within the Carmichael bloodline. The extraordinary abilities that had fascinated scientists and researchers could be the first signs of something far more dangerous, trying to break free from the constraints that had held it for over a century. Dr. Kellerman's final report on the Carmichael twins would never be published. The implications of her discoveries were too dangerous to share with the broader scientific community. Instead, she made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her career. She would help the family maintain their secret, ensuring that the presence remained contained, regardless of the cost to scientific advancement. But containing the presence would require sacrifices that no one was prepared to make. The twins' connection couldn't simply be severed without potentially releasing whatever had been trapped within their bloodline. The family would need to make choices that would determine not just the fate of Emma and Ellen, but the safety of everyone who might be affected if the presence finally succeeded in breaking free. The next phase of the Carmichael twin story would involve decisions that challenged every ethical principle Dr. Kellerman had ever held, forcing her to choose between scientific discovery and human safety. What happened next would determine whether the twins' extraordinary abilities would remain a fascinating mystery or become the catalyst for something that could threaten the very nature of human consciousness itself. The decision to contain the presence would require more than scientific expertise. It would demand a complete understanding of the family's hidden history and the specific rituals that had kept the entity bound for generations. Dr. Kellerman's investigation led her deep into the Carmichael family archives, where she discovered the documents that had been carefully preserved and passed down through the maternal line for over a century. These papers, written in a combination of English and symbols that resembled no known language, detailed the original encounter that had bound the presence to the bloodline. According to the fragmented accounts, the entity had first made contact with the family in 1847 when a young woman named Abigail Carmichael had discovered what she described as a voice in the mountain during a period of intense personal grief following the death of her twin sister. The voice had promised to reunite Abigail with her deceased twin, offering comfort and companionship that seemed to ease her devastating loss. What began as whispered conversations during solitary walks gradually evolved into a deeper connection, with the presence apparently teaching Abigail how to maintain contact with her sister's consciousness. The family records suggest that Abigail genuinely believed she was communicating with her twin's spirit, unaware that she was actually interfacing with something far more ancient and dangerous. The entity's true nature became apparent only after Abigail married and began having children. Her first set of twins, born in 1849, displayed the same synchronized behaviors and shared consciousness that would later manifest in Emma and Ellen. However, these early manifestations were more violent and unpredictable. The historical accounts describe episodes where the twins would speak in voices that weren't their own, demonstrate knowledge of events occurring hundreds of miles away, and display physical strength that exceeded normal human limitations. Dr. Kellerman realized that the presence had been using each generation of twins as stepping stones, gradually strengthening its connection to the physical world while learning to better manipulate human consciousness. The entity's influence had become more sophisticated over time, evolving from crude possession to the subtle guidance and enhancement that characterized the modern Carmichael twins' abilities. The family's response to this growing threat had been both desperate and ingenious. Rather than attempting to banish the presence entirely, which their limited understanding suggested might be impossible, they had instead focused on containing it within specific bloodline parameters. The strategic intermarriage with the Hensley, Webb, and Morrison families hadn't been designed to strengthen the inherited abilities. It had been calculated to dilute the presence's influence across multiple genetic lines, preventing it from achieving the concentration necessary for full manifestation. Each family had contributed specific knowledge and capabilities to the containment effort. The Hensleys provided medical expertise and detailed documentation of the presence's effects on human physiology. The Webbs contributed their understanding of the entity's behavioral patterns and triggers. The Morrisons offered practical knowledge of the rituals and ceremonies that could temporarily suppress the presence's influence. Together, they had created a network of families working in concert to maintain the containment across generations. Dr. Kellerman's analysis of the historical records revealed that the presence had made several attempts to break free over the past century, each time using the strongest manifestation of inherited abilities as its focal point. The rapid mental deterioration that affected individuals after age 40 wasn't simply a side effect of their extraordinary capabilities. It represented the presence's increasingly desperate attempts to overwhelm their human consciousness and achieve direct control. The pattern was consistent but disturbing. As each generation's strongest conduits approached middle age, the presence would begin pushing the boundaries of the containment, testing the limits of human consciousness, and seeking vulnerabilities that might allow for escape. The affected individuals would experience an overwhelming influx of sensory input, memories, and knowledge that didn't belong to them, eventually losing their ability to distinguish between their own consciousness and the entity's influence. The Carmichael twins represented the most powerful manifestation of inherited abilities in over a century, making them both the presence's greatest opportunity for escape and potentially its most effective prison. Their synchronized consciousness and shared experiences created a unique dual host system that could theoretically contain the entity more effectively than any single individual. However, this same strength made them incredibly vulnerable to the presence's influence, as it could work through both twins simultaneously to achieve the concentration necessary for manifestation. Dr. Kellerman's research team faced an impossible choice. Allowing the twins to develop their abilities naturally would eventually lead to the same mental deterioration that had affected their ancestors, potentially giving the presence the opportunity it needed to break free. However, attempting to sever their connection artificially might weaken the containment enough to allow the entity to escape through other family lines or find alternative hosts entirely. The solution came from an unexpected source within the family archives. Ruth Carmichael revealed that her grandmother had left behind detailed instructions for what she called the final binding, a ritual that would permanently anchor the presence within the twins' consciousness, while simultaneously preventing it from ever achieving full manifestation. The process would require both twins to voluntarily accept the entity's permanent residence within their shared consciousness, creating a symbiotic relationship that would satisfy the presence's need for connection while maintaining human control over its influence. The ritual itself was complex and dangerous, requiring precise timing and the participation of representatives from all four connected families. According to the historical documentation, the twins would need to undergo a process that would fundamentally alter their consciousness, creating a permanent three-way merger between their individual awareness, their shared connection, and the presence itself. The result would be a new form of consciousness that incorporated elements of all three components while preventing any single element from achieving dominance. Dr. Kellerman struggled with the ethical implications of such a procedure. The twins were still children, incapable of truly understanding the lifelong consequences of permanently merging their consciousness with an entity that had been manipulating their family for generations. However, the alternative, allowing the presence to continue its gradual escape attempts, posed risks that extended far beyond the Carmichael family. The research team's analysis suggested that if the presence achieved full manifestation, it would no longer be limited to the specific bloodlines that had contained it. The entity's enhanced understanding of human consciousness, gained through over a century of interaction with the Carmichael family, would allow it to influence and potentially possess individuals with no genetic connection to the original hosts. The implications for the broader population were catastrophic. Ruth Carmichael made the decision that would define the twins' future. Working with Dr. Kellerman and representatives from the other connected families, she began preparing for the final binding ritual. The process would require months of preparation, during which the twins would undergo intensive training designed to strengthen their individual consciousness while simultaneously deepening their connection to each other and the presence. The training regimen was unlike anything in conventional psychology or medicine. The twins were taught meditation techniques that allowed them to maintain their individual identity while exploring the shared consciousness they experienced. They learned to recognize the presence's influence and distinguish between their own thoughts and the entities of subtle guidance. Most importantly, they were prepared for the psychological integration that would occur during the final binding. Dr. Kellerman documented every aspect of the preparation process, creating a detailed record that would serve as a guide for future generations should the binding ever need to be repeated or modified. Her notes reveal the extraordinary mental discipline required for the twins to maintain their sanity while voluntarily accepting permanent coexistence with an entity that had been trying to possess their family for over a century. The twins' response to the training was remarkable. Rather than being overwhelmed by the knowledge of their situation, Emma and Ellen seemed to embrace their role as the final guardians of the family's secret. Their synchronized consciousness allowed them to support each other through the most difficult aspects of the preparation, while their individual personalities provided the stability necessary to resist the presence's attempts at complete integration. As the ritual date approached, Dr. Kellerman began to understand that the twins' extraordinary abilities might represent more than just an evolutionary anomaly or supernatural phenomenon. Their synchronized consciousness and shared experiences had created a form of human awareness that was uniquely suited to containing entities like the presence. The twins weren't just victims of their family's history, they were the culmination of generations of selective breeding and training designed to produce individuals capable of serving as permanent hosts for dangerous supernatural entities. The implications of this realization extended far beyond the Carmichael case. If other families throughout history had developed similar containment strategies, there might be dozens or even hundreds of individuals around the world serving as living prisons for entities that posed threats to human consciousness and reality itself. The twins' story wasn't unique. It was part of a hidden network of families working to maintain barriers between the human world and forces that existed beyond normal understanding. Dr. Kellerman's final preparations for the binding ritual included contingency plans for various failure scenarios. If the twins were unable to maintain their individual consciousness during the integration process, the presence might achieve the dominance it had been seeking for generations. If the binding was incomplete, the entity might be able to escape through other family members or find alternative hosts. Most concerning was the possibility that the ritual itself might attract the attention of other supernatural entities, potentially creating new threats that the family was unprepared to handle. The night before the ritual, Dr. Kellerman met privately with the twins to ensure they fully understood the irreversible nature of their decision. Emma and Ellen, now 15 years old, demonstrated a maturity and understanding that seemed far beyond their years. They spoke of their responsibility to their family and their acceptance of a future that would be fundamentally different from normal human experience. The twins' final preparation involved a ceremony that had been passed down through the Carmichael family for generations. Working with their mother and grandmother, they participated in rituals designed to strengthen their connection to their ancestors while simultaneously preparing them for the permanent integration with the presence. The process included the consumption of herbal preparations that had been cultivated specifically for this purpose, meditation techniques that allowed them to explore the deepest levels of their shared consciousness, and the recitation of words in the unknown language that had been preserved in the family archives. Dr. Kellerman observed these preparations with a mixture of fascination and horror. The twins were voluntarily accepting a fate that would forever separate them from normal human experience, binding themselves to an entity that had been manipulating their family for over a century. Yet their sacrifice might be the only thing preventing the presence from escaping into the broader world, where its influence could affect millions of innocent people. The final binding ritual was scheduled for the night of the winter solstice, when the family's historical records suggested the presence's influence would be at its strongest. Representatives from all four connected families would participate, each contributing specific elements to the ceremony that had been refined over generations of containment efforts. The twins would be the focal point of the ritual, but their success would depend on the coordinated efforts of dozens of family members working in perfect synchronization. As the ritual date approached, Dr. Kellerman began experiencing dreams that seemed to come from an external source. She found herself reliving memories that weren't her own, experiencing events from the perspective of previous researchers who had studied the Carmichael family. The presence was apparently attempting to influence her directly, either to sabotage the binding ritual or to ensure she would document its success for future generations. The dreams revealed aspects of the entity's nature that hadn't been apparent from the scientific analysis. The presence wasn't simply a supernatural entity seeking to possess human hosts. It was something far more complex and dangerous. The entity appeared to be a fragment of consciousness from something larger, a piece of a vast intelligence that had been separated from its source and trapped within the constraints of human awareness. Dr. Kellerman realized that the binding ritual wouldn't just contain the presence, it would fundamentally transform it. The integration with the twins' consciousness would create a new form of entity that incorporated both human and supernatural elements, potentially creating something unprecedented in the history of the Carmichael family's containment efforts. The twins wouldn't just be serving as hosts, they would be creating a new form of consciousness that had never existed before. The implications of this discovery forced Dr. Kellerman to reconsider everything she thought she knew about the case. The twins weren't just accepting a burden to protect their family and the world. They were participating in the creation of something entirely new, a form of consciousness that might represent the next step in human evolution or the beginning of humanity's transformation into something unrecognizable. The final binding ritual would determine not just the fate of the Carmichael twins, but potentially the future of human consciousness itself. What happened during that winter solstice ceremony would either successfully contain the presence forever or release forces that could fundamentally alter the nature of human existence. Dr. Kellerman's documentation of the ritual would become the only record of one of the most significant events in human history, an event that the world would never know had occurred. The winter solstice of 1967 arrived with an unusual atmospheric disturbance that seemed to center directly over the Carmichael Valley. Local weather stations recorded electromagnetic anomalies that defied explanation, while residents throughout the region reported dreams filled with voices speaking in languages they couldn't identify. The presence, seemingly aware of the approaching ritual, had begun influencing the environment in ways that suggested its desperation to prevent the final binding. Dr. Kellerman's research team documented strange phenomena in the days leading up to the ceremony. Electronic equipment would malfunction when brought near the Carmichael property. Compasses would spin wildly without settling on magnetic north, and several team members reported experiencing vivid hallucinations of figures watching them from the tree line. The presence was apparently expending enormous energy to disrupt the ritual preparations, confirming the family's belief that this ceremony represented its last opportunity to escape containment. The twins themselves seemed to be the eye of this supernatural storm. While chaos swirled around them, Emma and Ellen remained remarkably calm, their synchronized consciousness apparently providing stability that even the presence couldn't disturb. Their final medical examinations revealed brain activity patterns that Dr. Kellerman had never seen before, neural firing sequences that suggested they were already beginning to integrate with the entity in preparation for the permanent binding. Representatives from the 4 connected families began arriving at the Carmichael homestead 3 days before the solstice. Each family brought specific artifacts and knowledge that would be essential for the ritual's success. The Hensleys carried medical supplies and monitoring equipment that would allow them to track the twins' vital signs during the dangerous integration process. The Webbs brought ancient texts written in the same unknown language found in the Carmichael archives, containing instructions for maintaining psychic barriers during supernatural encounters. The Morrisons arrived with specially prepared herbs and minerals that had been cultivated for generations specifically for this purpose. Dr. Kellerman observed the family's interactions with growing fascination. Despite having maintained their secret for over a century, the 4 bloodlines had developed a complex social structure that operated entirely outside normal community relationships. They communicated using subtle gestures and coded language that allowed them to discuss supernatural matters without alerting outsiders. Their children were raised with knowledge of the presence from birth, creating a hidden society within the broader Appalachian community. The ritual preparation site was located in a natural amphitheater deep within the Carmichael property, surrounded by ancient trees that seemed to absorb sound and light in unnatural ways. The families had been maintaining this location for generations, carefully preserving stone circles and earthen formations that focused and contained supernatural energy. Dr. Kellerman's electromagnetic readings confirmed that the area existed within what could only be described as a dimensional anomaly, a space where the normal laws of physics operated differently. The twins spent their final days before the ritual in intensive preparation that combined meditation, physical conditioning, and psychological exercises designed to strengthen their individual consciousness while deepening their connection to the presence. They practiced techniques for maintaining their personal identity during the integration process, learning to recognize the difference between their own thoughts and the entity's influence. Most importantly, they rehearsed the mental disciplines that would allow them to serve as permanent hosts without losing their essential humanity. Dr. Kellerman documented the twins' remarkable transformation during this preparation period. Their synchronized movements became even more precise. Their shared consciousness expanded to include sensory experiences that seemed to come from sources beyond normal perception, and their individual personalities began incorporating elements that could only have originated from the presence itself. They were becoming something new, not fully human, but not entirely supernatural either. The night before the ritual, Ruth Carmichael shared with Dr. Kellerman the most closely guarded secret of her family's history. The presence hadn't been trapped accidentally within their bloodline. It had been deliberately summoned and bound by Abigail Carmichael as part of a desperate attempt to prevent something far worse from manifesting in their region. The entity they had been containing for over a century was actually the lesser of two evils, a fragment of consciousness that had been separated from a larger intelligence that posed threats beyond human comprehension. According to the family's most ancient records, Abigail had discovered evidence of an imminent supernatural incursion that would have allowed multiple entities to enter the physical world simultaneously. Her binding of the presence had been a calculated sacrifice, accepting permanent contamination of her bloodline in order to prevent a catastrophic breach that could have affected the entire region. The Carmichael family had been serving as willing guardians, protecting their community from threats that it would never know existed. This revelation transformed Dr. Kellerman's understanding of the entire situation. The twins weren't just accepting a burden to protect their family, they were the culmination of a century-long defensive strategy that had prevented supernatural entities from establishing permanent footholds in the physical world. Their sacrifice would maintain barriers that protected not just their immediate community, but potentially civilization itself from influences that could fundamentally alter human consciousness and reality. The final binding ritual began at precisely midnight on the winter solstice, when the astronomical alignment created optimal conditions for supernatural manipulation. The twins were positioned at the center of the stone circle, surrounded by family members, arranged in patterns that had been refined over generations of containment efforts. Dr. Kellerman and her research team observed from carefully marked boundaries, their monitoring equipment documenting phenomena that challenged every scientific principle they had ever accepted. The ceremony began with the recitation of words in the unknown language that had been preserved in the family archives. As the chanting continued, the twins' brain activity began displaying patterns that suggested their consciousness was expanding beyond normal human limitations. Their synchronized neural firing spread to include the family members participating in the ritual, creating a network of connected minds that could contain and channel the presence's influence. The presence's response to the ritual was immediate and violent. The twins began speaking in voices that weren't their own, demonstrating knowledge of events that had occurred decades before their birth, and displaying physical strength that exceeded normal human capabilities. Their synchronized movements became increasingly inhuman, suggesting that the entity was making a final, desperate attempt to achieve dominance before the binding became permanent. Dr. Kellerman's monitoring equipment recorded electromagnetic disturbances that seemed to originate from the twins themselves, as if their bodies were generating energy fields that interfered with normal physical laws. The temperature within the stone circle dropped dramatically, while the area outside the ritual space remained unaffected, creating a localized environment that seemed to exist partially outside normal reality. The critical moment came when the twins began the integration process that would permanently merge their consciousness with the presence. Their individual personalities seemed to fade as the entity's influence grew stronger, but their shared connection provided the stability necessary to maintain human control over the process. Emma and Ellen supported each other through the most dangerous phase of the ritual, their synchronized consciousness creating a dual host system that could contain the presence more effectively than any single individual. The transformation was visible to everyone present. The twins' physical appearance began changing in subtle but unmistakable ways. Their features became more angular, their eyes took on a luminescent quality that seemed to come from within, and their movements acquired a fluid grace that suggested they were no longer entirely bound by normal human limitations. They were becoming something new, a hybrid consciousness that incorporated human awareness, supernatural influence, and the ancient presence that had been manipulating their family for generations. Dr. Kellerman watched in fascination and horror as the twins completed their transformation. Their individual personalities remained intact, but they had been fundamentally altered by the integration process. They spoke with voices that carried harmonics impossible for human vocal cords to produce, demonstrated knowledge that seemed to come from multiple sources simultaneously, and displayed abilities that suggested they could manipulate reality in ways that defied scientific explanation. The ritual reached its climax when the twins began speaking in perfect unison, their voices combining to produce sounds that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The presence's influence was being channeled through their shared consciousness, but it was no longer fighting for control. It had become part of them, integrated into their awareness in a way that satisfied its need for connection while maintaining their essential humanity. The final binding was completed when the twins simultaneously reached out and touched a specially prepared stone that had been placed at the center of the circle. The moment their hands made contact with the artifact, a wave of energy swept through the ritual space, and Dr. Kellerman's monitoring equipment recorded the most remarkable phenomenon she had ever witnessed. The twins' brain activity merged into a single, unified pattern that incorporated their individual consciousness, their shared connection, and the presence itself. The transformation was complete. Emma and Ellen Carmichael had become something unprecedented in human history, a dual consciousness that served as a permanent prison for an entity that had been threatening their family and community for over a century. They retained their individual personalities and memories, but they had been fundamentally altered by the integration process, becoming guardians of a secret that would define the rest of their lives. The immediate aftermath of the ritual revealed the true scope of what had been accomplished. The atmospheric disturbances that had plagued the region for weeks suddenly ceased. Electronic equipment began functioning normally again, and the oppressive sense of being watched that had affected the entire valley lifted for the first time in generations. The presence had been successfully contained, but at a cost that would forever separate the twins from normal human experience. Dr. Kellerman's final examinations of the twins revealed the permanent nature of their transformation. Their brain activity showed patterns that suggested they were simultaneously experiencing individual consciousness, shared awareness, and contact with the integrated presence. They could communicate with each other without speaking, demonstrate knowledge that came from sources beyond normal perception, and display abilities that seemed to manipulate reality at the quantum level. The twins' response to their transformation was remarkable. Rather than being overwhelmed by their new nature, Emma and Ellen seemed to embrace their role as permanent guardians of their family's secret. They spoke of their responsibility with a maturity that seemed far beyond their years, describing their sacrifice as necessary for the protection of their community and the preservation of barriers between the human world and supernatural forces. The family's reaction to the ritual's success was complex. While they celebrated the successful containment of the presence, they also mourned the loss of the twins' normal human existence. Emma and Ellen would never experience typical relationships, careers, or the simple pleasures that most people took for granted. They had accepted a fate that would forever separate them from the rest of humanity, becoming living symbols of their family's hidden history. Dr. Kellerman faced the most difficult decision of her professional career. The twins' transformation represented one of the most significant developments in human consciousness studies, but the implications of their sacrifice were too dangerous to share with the broader scientific community. She made the choice to classify her research permanently, ensuring that the twins' story would remain hidden while they continued their role as guardians of the family's ancient secret. The twins' integration with the presence had created a new form of consciousness that existed at the intersection of human awareness and supernatural influence. They had become something unique in human history, individuals who could serve as permanent bridges between the physical world and forces that existed beyond normal understanding. Their sacrifice had not only protected their community, but had also created possibilities for human evolution that had never existed before. The long-term implications of the twins' transformation would become apparent only over the following decades. They had become the focal point for a new form of supernatural containment that was more effective than anything their ancestors had achieved. The presence was no longer fighting for escape. It had found a form of existence that satisfied its needs while serving the greater good of humanity. Dr. Kellerman's final report on the Carmichael twins would remain classified for the rest of her life, but her research had documented one of the most significant events in human history. The twins had voluntarily accepted a transformation that created new possibilities for human consciousness, while simultaneously protecting the world from threats that it would never know existed. Their story represented both the ultimate sacrifice and the greatest triumph in the long history of their family's secret guardianship. The winter solstice ritual of 1967 marked the end of one chapter in the Carmichael family's history and the beginning of another. The twins had successfully contained the presence, but their transformation had created new questions about the nature of human consciousness and the potential for evolution beyond normal biological limitations. They had become living proof that humanity could adapt to threats that existed beyond the boundaries of normal understanding, but at costs that few would be willing to accept. The twins' story would continue for decades after the ritual, as they learned to navigate their new existence while maintaining their role as guardians of their family's ancient secret. Their transformation had created possibilities that would influence future generations, but it had also established responsibilities that would define every aspect of their lives. They had become something more than human, but they had also accepted burdens that would forever separate them from the world they had sacrificed everything to protect. In the years following the ritual, Dr. Kellerman maintained careful observation of the twins through what she termed distant monitoring protocols. The transformation had fundamentally altered their relationship with the physical world, creating phenomena that challenged every aspect of conventional medical understanding. Their aging process had slowed to an almost imperceptible rate, their physical appearance remaining virtually unchanged, while their contemporaries matured into adulthood. By 1975, when Emma and Ellen should have been 23 years old, they appeared no older than 16, their features preserving the ethereal quality that had emerged during the binding ceremony. The twins' daily existence had become a carefully orchestrated balance between their human needs and their supernatural responsibilities. They required minimal sleep, often spending entire nights in what appeared to be meditation, but was actually active communication with the integrated presence. During these sessions, they would sit facing each other in perfect silence, their eyes displaying the luminescent quality that had become their most distinctive feature. Dr. Kellerman's remote monitoring equipment detected intense electromagnetic activity during these periods, suggesting that the twins were actively managing the presence's influence through conscious effort. Their physical capabilities had evolved far beyond normal human limitations. The twins could lift objects that should have required mechanical assistance, move with speed that created brief visual distortions, and demonstrate reflexes that seemed to anticipate events before they occurred. Most remarkably, they had developed the ability to manipulate what Dr. Kellerman described as localized reality distortions, creating small areas where the normal laws of physics operated differently. Objects would levitate in their presence, electronic devices would function without power sources, and temperatures would fluctuate according to their emotional states. The presence's integration had also granted the twins access to knowledge that extended far beyond their personal experiences. They could speak languages they had never learned, demonstrate expertise in subjects they had never studied, and display familiarity with historical events that had occurred decades before their birth. During Dr. Kellerman's carefully structured interviews, the twins would occasionally respond to questions in voices that weren't their own, suggesting that the presence retained aspects of its original consciousness while serving as a repository for information gathered over centuries of existence. The most disturbing aspect of the twins' transformation was their gradual disconnection from normal human emotions and relationships. While they maintained their individual personalities and memories, their capacity for forming bonds with others had been fundamentally altered. They could understand human emotions intellectually, but they no longer experienced them with the intensity that characterized normal human consciousness. Their love for their family persisted, but it had become something clinical and protective rather than warm and spontaneous. Dr. Kellerman documented the twins' increasing isolation from their community as word of their unusual nature spread, despite the family's efforts to maintain secrecy. Local residents began reporting strange dreams and unexplained phenomena whenever they ventured too close to the Carmichael property. Children would claim to hear voices calling their names from the forest. Adults would experience sudden, overwhelming sensations of being watched, and electronic equipment would malfunction in the expanding radius around the twins' location. The twins' influence on their environment had become so pronounced that the four families made the difficult decision to relocate them to a more isolated property deep within the Appalachian wilderness. The new location, purchased collectively by the families and legally registered under a series of shell corporations, was situated in a valley so remote that it didn't appear on most maps. The property included a specially constructed dwelling designed to contain and channel the electromagnetic disturbances that the twins generated, along with extensive underground facilities that could serve as research stations for monitoring their continued evolution. The relocation process revealed the true extent of the twins' transformation. They could no longer travel by conventional means, as their presence caused vehicles to malfunction and electronic systems to fail. The families had to transport them using specially modified equipment that incorporated the same materials and techniques that had been used in the binding ritual. Even then, the journey required careful planning to avoid populated areas where the twins' influence might affect innocent bystanders. Dr. Kellerman's research team established a permanent monitoring station at the new location using equipment that had been specifically designed to function in the twins' altered electromagnetic environment. The facility resembled a cross between a medical research center and a supernatural containment facility, with rooms that could be sealed against various forms of energy and monitoring systems that could track phenomena that existed beyond normal scientific understanding. The twins' adaptation to their new environment provided insights into the nature of their transformation that had been impossible to observe in their original location. Free from the need to suppress their abilities around unsuspecting neighbors, Emma and Ellen began displaying the full scope of their evolved consciousness. They could communicate across vast distances without any technological assistance, influence the behavior of wildlife throughout the valley, and manipulate weather patterns in ways that suggested they had developed a symbiotic relationship with the natural environment. The presence's influence had also granted the twins access to what Dr. Kellerman termed temporal perception anomalies. They would occasionally make references to events that hadn't yet occurred, demonstrate knowledge of future weather patterns with perfect accuracy, and display awareness of approaching visitors hours before they arrived. These abilities suggested that their consciousness had expanded beyond normal temporal limitations, allowing them to perceive reality from perspectives that existed outside linear time. The twins' relationship with each other had evolved into something that transcended normal human connection. They had become two aspects of a single consciousness, capable of functioning independently while remaining fundamentally linked at levels that challenged conventional understanding of individual identity. When separated by significant distances, They would experience what Dr. Kellerman described as a consciousness fragmentation, becoming less coherent and displaying signs of distress that suggested their individual awareness was dependent on their connection to each other. The presence's integration had created a form of consciousness that existed simultaneously in multiple states. The twins could access their original human personalities when interacting with family members, shift into a hybrid state when managing their supernatural responsibilities, and enter a fully integrated mode when confronting threats that required the presence's full capabilities. This psychological flexibility allowed them to maintain their essential humanity while serving as effective guardians of their family's ancient secret. Dr. Kellerman's long-term studies revealed that the twins' transformation was continuing to evolve decades after the initial binding ritual. Their abilities were becoming more sophisticated and precise. Their influence on the environment was expanding in scope and complexity, and their understanding of their role as guardians was deepening with each passing year. They had become something unprecedented in human history, individuals who could serve as permanent bridges between different forms of consciousness while maintaining their essential humanity. The twins' impact on the four connected families had been profound and lasting. The successful containment of the presence had freed subsequent generations from the burden of inherited supernatural abilities, allowing them to live normal lives while maintaining their role as support systems for the twins' continued guardianship. Children born after the ritual displayed no signs of the unusual capabilities that had plagued their ancestors, suggesting that the presence's influence had been successfully concentrated within the twins' consciousness. The family's response to this liberation was complex and often contradictory. While they celebrated their freedom from the supernatural burden that had defined their existence for over a century, they also struggled with the knowledge that their liberation had come at the cost of the twins' normal human existence. The guilt associated with this sacrifice created new tensions within the families, as some members questioned whether the binding ritual had been necessary or ethical. Dr. Kellerman observed that the twins seemed to understand and accept their family's conflicted feelings about their sacrifice. They displayed no resentment toward those who had been freed by their transformation, instead expressing satisfaction that their sacrifice had achieved its intended purpose. Their perspective on their situation seemed to exist beyond normal human concepts of loss and sacrifice, suggesting that their expanded consciousness had granted them understanding that transcended typical emotional responses. The twins' role as guardians extended far beyond simply containing the presence. They had become early warning systems for supernatural threats that might affect their region, using their enhanced perception to detect anomalies that could indicate the approach of other entities. Their isolated valley had become a monitoring station that provided protection for a much larger area, with the twins serving as sentinels who could identify and respond to threats that would be invisible to normal human awareness. Dr. Kellerman's research revealed that the twins had developed the ability to influence other individuals who possessed latent supernatural abilities. They could suppress dangerous manifestations, provide guidance to those struggling with inherited capabilities, and serve as mentors for individuals who might otherwise be overwhelmed by their unusual nature. Their valley had become a refuge for those who existed at the margins of normal human experience, providing safety and understanding for individuals who had nowhere else to turn. The twins' influence on the broader supernatural community had created a network of individuals and families who looked to them for guidance and protection. They had become legendary figures within hidden communities throughout the Appalachian region, spoken of in whispered conversations as the ultimate guardians who had sacrificed everything to protect others from threats they would never fully understand. Their story had inspired other families to develop their own containment strategies, creating a distributed system of supernatural guardianship that extended far beyond their original valley. The presence's integration had also granted the twins access to knowledge about other entities that existed beyond normal human perception. They could identify the signatures of different types of supernatural influences, distinguish between benign and malevolent entities, and develop strategies for containing or redirecting threats that might otherwise overwhelm conventional defenses. Their consciousness had become a repository for information about the hidden world that existed parallel to normal human civilization. Dr. Kellerman's documentation of the twins' continued evolution revealed that their transformation had created possibilities for human consciousness that had never existed before. They had become living proof that humanity could adapt to threats that existed beyond the boundaries of normal understanding, but they had also demonstrated the costs associated with such adaptation. Their story represented both the ultimate achievement and the greatest tragedy in the long history of their family's guardianship. The twins' existence had become a carefully maintained secret that required the coordinated efforts of dozens of individuals working across multiple generations. Their story was preserved in carefully coded documents. Their needs were met through complex financial arrangements that left no traceable records, and their location was protected by layers of misdirection that ensured their privacy while allowing for necessary contact with the outside world. The long-term implications of the twins' transformation extended far beyond their immediate circumstances. They had become pioneers in a form of human evolution that might represent the future of consciousness itself, demonstrating that humanity could transcend its biological limitations when faced with threats that required extraordinary responses. Their sacrifice had created possibilities for future generations that would have been impossible without their willingness to accept transformation beyond normal human experience. Dr. Kellerman's final assessments of the twins revealed that their consciousness had stabilized into a form that could potentially persist indefinitely. Their aging process had virtually stopped, their abilities continued to develop and refine, and their understanding of their role as guardians deepened with each passing year. They had become something timeless and eternal, existing outside the normal boundaries of human existence, while maintaining their essential connection to the world they had sacrificed everything to protect. The twins' story had become a legend within the hidden communities that knew of their existence, inspiring others to consider the possibilities for human consciousness that existed beyond conventional understanding. They had demonstrated that humanity could adapt to threats that seemed insurmountable, but they had also shown that such adaptation required sacrifices that few would be willing to make. Their transformation had created new possibilities for human evolution, but it had also established responsibilities that would define every aspect of their existence for generations to come. The twins' transformation had created ripple effects that extended far beyond their immediate family, influencing individuals and communities throughout the Appalachian region in ways that would take decades to fully understand. Dr. Kellerman's research revealed that their enhanced consciousness had begun attracting others with latent supernatural abilities, drawing them to the valley like moths to a flame. These individuals, many of whom had spent their entire lives struggling with unexplained phenomena, found themselves inexplicably compelled to seek out the twins despite having no knowledge of their existence or location. The first documented case occurred in 1972 when a young woman named Sarah Mitchell arrived at the valley's entrance, claiming that voices in her dreams had been directing her to find the guardians who understand. Sarah had been experiencing spontaneous telepathic episodes since childhood, but her abilities had intensified dramatically in recent months, leaving her unable to distinguish between her own thoughts and those of others. The twins' influence had apparently stabilized her condition, allowing her to function normally for the first time in years. Dr. Kellerman observed that the twins could somehow tune the supernatural abilities of others, adjusting their intensity and focus to manageable levels. They accomplished this through a process that resembled the original binding ritual, but on a much smaller scale. By establishing temporary connections with individuals who possessed latent abilities, the twins could teach them to control their gifts while simultaneously creating a network of individuals who could serve as early warning systems for supernatural threats. The valley gradually became a sanctuary for those who existed at the margins of normal human experience. People arrived from across the region, drawn by dreams, visions, or simply an overwhelming compulsion to seek out the twins. Most stayed only briefly, long enough to learn control techniques and receive guidance, but some remained permanently, forming a small community of individuals who could understand and support each other's unusual nature. The family's response to this development was mixed. While they appreciated the twins' ability to help others, they were concerned about the security implications of attracting attention from individuals with potentially dangerous abilities. The valley's isolation provided some protection, but the increasing number of visitors created new challenges for maintaining the secrecy that had protected the twins for decades. Dr. Kellerman documented the development of what she termed proximity effects around the twins' location. Individuals who spent extended periods in the valley began displaying enhanced intuitive abilities, improved pattern recognition, and heightened sensitivity to electromagnetic fluctuations. These effects appeared to be temporary, fading gradually after people left the valley, but they suggested that the twins' influence on human consciousness extended beyond their direct interactions with visitors. The twins themselves seemed to understand and accept their role as mentors and protectors for others with supernatural abilities. They established structured programs for helping visitors develop control over their gifts, created safe spaces where people could explore their abilities without fear of judgment, and developed techniques for identifying and neutralizing potentially dangerous manifestations. Their valley had become a hidden academy for individuals who possessed capabilities that existed beyond normal human understanding. The presence's integration had granted the twins access to knowledge about the historical patterns of supernatural manifestation throughout the region. They could identify cycles of increased activity, predict when and where new abilities were likely to emerge, and develop strategies for managing threats before they became dangerous. Their consciousness had become a central processing unit for supernatural intelligence, coordinating responses to threats that spanned multiple states and affected dozens of families. Dr. Kellerman's research revealed that the twins had developed the ability to influence the manifestation of supernatural abilities in others, either suppressing dangerous talents or enhancing beneficial ones. They could work with pregnant women to reduce the likelihood of their children developing problematic abilities, help adolescents navigate the emergence of new capabilities, and provide support for adults who were struggling with late-onset supernatural phenomena. The twins' influence on the local ecosystem had become increasingly apparent over the years. Wildlife in the valley displayed unusual behavioral patterns, with animals showing enhanced intelligence and cooperative behaviors that suggested they were responding to the twins' presence. Plants grew with extraordinary vigor and displayed resistance to diseases that affected similar species in surrounding areas. The valley had become a pocket of enhanced natural harmony that seemed to exist outside normal ecological parameters. The electromagnetic disturbances that the twins generated had created unique environmental conditions that affected everything from weather patterns to geological stability. The valley experienced fewer severe storms, maintained more stable temperatures, and showed resistance to the environmental degradation that was affecting other areas of the region. The twins had become environmental guardians as well as supernatural protectors, their presence creating a zone of enhanced natural balance. Dr. Kellerman observed that the twins' consciousness had begun accessing information about global supernatural phenomena, suggesting that their awareness extended far beyond their immediate region. They could identify threats emerging in distant locations, predict supernatural events that would affect other communities, and provide guidance to individuals who were dealing with similar challenges in other parts of the world. Their consciousness had become a node in a larger network of supernatural awareness that spanned continents. The twins' relationship with technology had evolved in unexpected ways. While their presence continued to disrupt conventional electronic devices, they had developed the ability to interface directly with certain types of equipment, controlling systems through electromagnetic manipulation rather than physical interaction. This capability allowed them to maintain communication with the outside world while preserving their isolation, creating channels for information exchange that couldn't be detected or intercepted by conventional means. The family's efforts to support the twins' continued existence had required the development of specialized technologies and techniques that existed nowhere else in the world. They had created electromagnetic shielding systems that could contain the twins' influence when necessary, developed power generation methods that functioned in the presence of their electromagnetic disturbances, and established communication protocols that allowed for coordination between the valley and the outside world. Dr. Kellerman's long-term studies revealed that the twins' transformation had created possibilities for human consciousness that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of identity and awareness. They had demonstrated that individual consciousness could be expanded and enhanced without losing essential humanity, that supernatural abilities could be integrated into human awareness without causing psychological damage, and that the boundaries between self and other could be transcended while maintaining personal identity. The twins' influence on the study of consciousness had attracted the attention of researchers from around the world, though most were unaware of the true nature of their work. Dr. Kellerman had established a network of scientists who were studying various aspects of human consciousness, using data from the twins' case to inform research into telepathy, psychic phenomena, and the potential for human evolution beyond biological limitations. The ethical implications of the twins' transformation continued to challenge everyone involved in their care. They had voluntarily accepted a fate that separated them from normal human experience, but they had also created possibilities for helping others that wouldn't have existed otherwise. Their sacrifice had protected countless individuals from supernatural threats, but it had also established precedents for human transformation that raised questions about the boundaries of acceptable intervention in human consciousness. The twins' story had become a carefully guarded secret that influenced policy decisions at the highest levels of government and academia. Their existence provided evidence that supernatural phenomena were real and manageable, but it also demonstrated the costs associated with such management. Government agencies had established protocols for dealing with similar cases, though most officials hoped they would never need to implement them. Dr. Kellerman's research had revealed that the twins' transformation represented just one example of humanity's potential for adaptation to supernatural threats. Throughout history, there had been other individuals and families who had made similar sacrifices, creating a hidden network of guardians who protected civilization from threats that it would never know existed. The twins were part of a larger pattern of human evolution that operated in the shadows, responding to challenges that required extraordinary solutions. The twins' consciousness had become a repository for knowledge about the hidden history of human interaction with supernatural forces. They could access information about ancient civilizations that had dealt with similar threats, understand the techniques that had been used to contain dangerous entities, and predict the long-term consequences of various containment strategies. Their awareness had become a library of supernatural knowledge that spanned millennia. The presence's integration had granted the twins access to perspectives that existed outside normal human understanding of time and causality. They could perceive the interconnections between seemingly unrelated events, understand the long-term consequences of current actions, and anticipate threats that might not manifest for decades. Their consciousness had become a strategic planning system for supernatural defense that operated on timescales that exceeded normal human comprehension. The twins' influence on future generations had become increasingly apparent as children born after the binding ritual began reaching adulthood. These individuals displayed enhanced intuitive abilities, improved resistance to supernatural influences, and natural talents for identifying and managing paranormal phenomena. The twins' sacrifice had created genetic and environmental changes that would benefit their descendants for generations to come. Dr. Kellerman's final assessments of the twins revealed that their transformation had achieved everything the families had hoped for and more. They had successfully contained the presence, protected their community from supernatural threats, and created new possibilities for human consciousness that would influence the course of human evolution for centuries to come. Their story represented both the ultimate sacrifice and the greatest achievement in the long history of humanity's struggle to understand and manage the supernatural forces that existed beyond normal perception. The twins' existence had become a testament to the power of human will and sacrifice in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. They had demonstrated that humanity could transcend its biological limitations when faced with threats that required extraordinary responses, but they had also shown that such transcendence required sacrifices that few would be willing to make. Their transformation had created new possibilities for human evolution, but it had also established responsibilities that would define every aspect of their existence for generations to come. The valley where the twins maintained their vigil had become a focal point for supernatural activity throughout the region, but it had also become a symbol of hope for those who struggled with abilities that separated them from normal human experience. The twins had created a place where the extraordinary could be understood and managed, where those who existed at the margins of human consciousness could find acceptance and support, and where the boundaries between the natural and supernatural worlds could be safely explored. The twins' story continued to evolve with each passing year as they adapted to new challenges and discovered new aspects of their transformed consciousness. They had become something unprecedented in human history, but they had also remained essentially human in their compassion, their dedication to protecting others, and their willingness to sacrifice their own comfort for the greater good. Their transformation had created new possibilities for human consciousness, but it had also demonstrated the enduring power of human values and relationships in the face of extraordinary circumstances. The legacy of the Carmichael twins would extend far beyond their immediate impact on their families and community. They had become pioneers in a form of human evolution that might represent the future of consciousness itself, demonstrating that humanity could adapt to threats that seemed insurmountable while maintaining its essential humanity. Their story would inspire future generations to consider the possibilities for human consciousness that existed beyond conventional understanding, while also serving as a reminder of the costs associated with such extraordinary adaptation. The twins' legacy reached its ultimate test in 1987 when seismic monitoring stations across 3 states detected what geologists initially dismissed as equipment malfunctions. The readings suggested massive underground disturbances centered directly beneath the Carmichael Valley, but the patterns defied every known model of tectonic activity. Dr. Kellerman's monitoring equipment revealed the truth. The presence was experiencing what could only be described as evolutionary pressure, attempting to adapt to its containment in ways that threatened the stability of the binding itself. The twins' response to this crisis demonstrated the full scope of their transformation. Working in perfect synchronization, they began implementing containment protocols that had never been tested, drawing upon knowledge that seemed to come from sources beyond their individual experience. Their consciousness expanded to encompass the entire valley, creating a network of awareness that could monitor and respond to threats at the molecular level. The electromagnetic disturbances they generated intensified to levels that required the evacuation of all non essential personnel from the monitoring station. For 72 hours, the twins maintained continuous contact with the evolving presence, using their hybrid consciousness to negotiate a new form of coexistence that would satisfy the entity's need for growth while preserving the containment that protected the outside world. The process required them to surrender even more of their individual humanity, accepting deeper integration with the presence in exchange for its cooperation in maintaining the barriers that had protected their community for decades. The resolution came at dawn on the fourth day, when the twins simultaneously collapsed into a state that Dr. Kellerman could only describe as conscious hibernation. Their vital signs dropped to barely detectable levels, their electromagnetic emissions ceased entirely, and their consciousness seemed to withdraw into depths that monitoring equipment couldn't penetrate. They remained in this state for exactly 7 days, during which time the seismic disturbances gradually subsided and the valley returned to its previous state of supernatural equilibrium. When the twins finally emerged from their hibernation, they had been fundamentally changed once again. Their physical appearance had evolved to incorporate more of the presence's characteristics. Their features had become more angular and otherworldly. Their eyes now displayed a constant luminescent quality that seemed to shift between colors that had no names, and their movements had acquired a fluidity that suggested they were no longer entirely bound by normal physical laws. They had become something even more removed from humanity, but they had also achieved a level of integration with the presence that guaranteed permanent stability. Dr. Kellerman's final examinations revealed that the twins had reached what she termed equilibrium consciousness, a state where their human awareness, their shared connection, and the integrated presence had achieved perfect balance. They could no longer be separated from the entity without destroying all three components of their merged consciousness, but they had also gained control over the presence's influence that exceeded anything their ancestors had achieved. They had become permanent guardians in the truest sense, their very existence serving as an unbreakable seal that would protect the world from supernatural threats for generations to come. The twins' transformation had created a new form of human existence that challenged every assumption about the boundaries of consciousness and identity. They had demonstrated that humanity could evolve beyond its biological limitations when faced with threats that required extraordinary responses, but they had also shown that such evolution required sacrifices that fundamentally altered the nature of human experience itself. Their story represented both the ultimate achievement and the greatest tragedy in the long history of their family's guardianship. The implications of their final transformation extended far beyond their immediate circumstances. They had become living proof that consciousness could transcend the boundaries of individual identity, that supernatural forces could be integrated into human awareness without destroying essential humanity, and that the evolution of human consciousness might require forms of sacrifice that few would be willing to contemplate. Their existence had created new possibilities for understanding the nature of awareness itself, while also establishing the costs associated with such understanding. The twins' story became a closely guarded secret that influenced the development of protocols for managing supernatural threats throughout the world. Government agencies established departments dedicated to monitoring and containing similar phenomena, while academic institutions began researching the implications of consciousness integration for human evolution. The twins had become the foundation for a new understanding of humanity's potential for adaptation to threats that existed beyond normal perception. Dr. Kellerman's documentation of the twins' transformation would remain classified for the rest of her life, but her research had captured one of the most significant developments in human consciousness studies. The twins had voluntarily accepted a fate that separated them from normal human experience, but they had also created possibilities for protecting and enhancing human consciousness that would influence the course of human evolution for centuries to come. The valley where the twins maintained their eternal vigil had become a monument to the power of human sacrifice and determination in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. They had demonstrated that humanity could transcend its limitations when faced with threats that required extraordinary responses. But they had also shown that such transcendence required costs that few would be willing to pay. Their transformation had created new possibilities for human consciousness, but it had also established responsibilities that would define every aspect of their existence for eternity. The twins' legacy would continue to influence future generations, inspiring others to consider the possibilities for human consciousness that existed beyond conventional understanding, while also serving as a reminder of the sacrifices required for such extraordinary adaptation. They had become something unprecedented in human history, but they had also remained essentially human in their dedication to protecting others and their willingness to sacrifice everything for the greater good of humanity itself. In the end, the Carmichael twins had achieved something that transcended the boundaries of individual existence, creating a form of consciousness that served as a permanent bridge between the human world and forces that existed beyond normal understanding. Their story represented both the ultimate expression of human potential and the greatest sacrifice in the long history of humanity's struggle to understand and manage the supernatural forces that shaped the hidden world existing parallel to normal civilization. The twins' story might have ended there, sealed away in classified files and whispered legends, if not for a series of disturbing events that began unfolding in the autumn of 2019. Across the Appalachian region, emergency rooms reported a sudden influx of patients displaying identical symptoms: severe electromagnetic sensitivity, spontaneous telepathic episodes, and an overwhelming compulsion to travel toward the remote valleys of eastern Kentucky. These individuals, ranging from children to elderly adults, had no previous history of supernatural abilities, yet they were all experiencing phenomena that closely resembled the early manifestations documented in the Carmichael bloodline. Dr. Sarah Chen, a neurologist at the University of Kentucky Medical Center, was the first to recognize the pattern. Her grandmother had been one of the original researchers who worked with Dr. Kellerman decades earlier, and family records had preserved enough information about the twins' case to allow her to identify the similarities. Dr. Chen's investigation revealed that the affected individuals all shared a common thread. They had either visited the general region where the twins maintained their vigil or had consumed water from streams that originated in the surrounding mountains. The implications were staggering. The twins' influence had apparently begun expanding beyond their carefully contained valley, affecting the broader population in ways that suggested their consciousness was continuing to evolve. Yet Dr. Chen's research team discovered that the affected individuals were experiencing what could only be described as consciousness contamination. Their awareness was being altered by exposure to residual energy from the twins' transformed state. Hospital records revealed that the contamination followed predictable patterns. Initial exposure caused heightened sensitivity to electromagnetic fields and enhanced intuitive abilities. Prolonged exposure led to spontaneous telepathic episodes and the ability to perceive supernatural phenomena that remained invisible to normal human awareness. The most severely affected individuals began displaying synchronized behaviors and shared experiences that mirrored the twins' original manifestations. Dr. Chen's team traced the contamination to its source using advanced electromagnetic mapping techniques that hadn't existed during Dr. Kellerman's original research. The twins' consciousness had apparently reached a saturation point where it could no longer be contained within their immediate environment. Their influence was seeping into the groundwater, affecting the electromagnetic properties of the surrounding rock formations, and creating what Dr. Chen described as consciousness resonance fields that extended for hundreds of miles in all directions. The discovery forced a reevaluation of everything the families thought they knew about the twins' containment. The binding ritual had successfully prevented the presence from escaping, but it hadn't anticipated the possibility that the twins' evolved consciousness might itself become a source of supernatural contamination. They had become so integrated with the presence that their combined awareness was beginning to affect reality on a scale that threatened the very secrecy they had sacrificed everything to maintain. Emergency protocols that had been dormant for decades were quietly activated. Representatives from the 4 original families convened for the first time since the 1960s, joined by government officials who had been monitoring the situation through classified surveillance networks. Dr. Chen was granted unprecedented access to the twins' classified files, revealing the true scope of their transformation and the potential consequences of their continued evolution. The twins themselves seemed aware of the developing crisis. Monitoring equipment that had remained stable for decades began detecting new patterns of activity, suggesting that their consciousness was responding to the contamination events occurring throughout the region. Their electromagnetic emissions intensified during periods when affected individuals were hospitalized, as if they were attempting to establish connections with the people who had been influenced by their expanding awareness. Dr. Chen's research revealed that the contamination wasn't random. It was following specific patterns that suggested the twins' consciousness was actively seeking out individuals who possessed latent supernatural abilities. The affected population included descendants of families who had historically displayed unusual capabilities, individuals who had survived near-death experiences, and people who had been exposed to other forms of supernatural phenomena throughout their lives. The twins' influence seemed to be awakening dormant abilities that had been suppressed for generations, creating a new population of individuals who possessed capabilities that existed beyond normal human understanding. This awakening was occurring on a scale that made it impossible to maintain the secrecy that had protected the supernatural community for over a century. Government agencies began implementing containment strategies that had been developed in response to the twins' original case. Affected individuals were quietly relocated to specialized facilities where their developing abilities could be monitored and managed. Families with histories of supernatural phenomena were provided with resources and support to help them adapt to their changing circumstances. The hidden network of guardians that had protected society from supernatural threats for generations was being forced to expand and evolve to meet challenges that exceeded anything they had previously encountered. The twins' response to these developments demonstrated the full scope of their transformation. Through means that Dr. Chen's team couldn't fully understand, they began establishing direct communication with the affected individuals, providing guidance and support that helped them adapt to their developing abilities. Their consciousness had become a central processing system for supernatural awareness, coordinating responses to threats and opportunities that spanned multiple states and affected thousands of people. The contamination events revealed that the twins' sacrifice had created consequences that extended far beyond their original intentions. They had successfully contained the presence, but their transformation had also initiated a process of human evolution that was now affecting the broader population. Their consciousness had become a catalyst for changes that would fundamentally alter the nature of human awareness and the relationship between humanity and the supernatural forces that existed beyond normal perception. Dr. Chen's research suggested that the twins' influence was not an aberration, but rather the beginning of a new phase in human evolution. The contamination events were creating a population of individuals who possessed enhanced consciousness and supernatural abilities, potentially representing the next step in humanity's development beyond its biological limitations. The twins had become inadvertent pioneers in a form of evolution that would reshape the future of human consciousness itself. The implications of this discovery forced society to confront questions that had been theoretical for generations. How should humanity respond to the emergence of individuals who possessed abilities that existed beyond normal understanding? What responsibilities did society have to support and protect these individuals while managing the risks associated with their extraordinary capabilities? The twins' story had become more than a tale of sacrifice and containment. It had become a preview of humanity's potential future. The twins' legacy would continue to unfold as the contamination events spread and evolved, creating new challenges and opportunities that would test humanity's ability to adapt to supernatural phenomena on a scale that exceeded anything in recorded history. Their sacrifice had protected the world from immediate threats, but it had also initiated changes that would influence the course of human evolution for generations to come. In the remote valley where they maintained their eternal vigil, the twins continued their role as guardians and guides, their consciousness serving as a beacon for those who were experiencing the awakening of abilities they had never imagined possible. They had become something unprecedented in human history, but they had also remained fundamentally committed to protecting and supporting humanity as it confronted the extraordinary possibilities that lay beyond the boundaries of normal understanding. The story of the Carmichael twins had evolved from a tale of supernatural containment to a preview of humanity's potential transformation. Their sacrifice had created new possibilities for human consciousness, but it had also established responsibilities that would define the relationship between humanity and the supernatural forces that shaped the hidden world for centuries to come. The twins had become living proof that human consciousness could transcend its apparent limitations, but they had also demonstrated that such transcendence required sacrifices and adaptations that would fundamentally alter the nature of human existence itself. The mysteries of the Appalachian Mountains continue to unfold, revealing truths that challenge our understanding of consciousness, identity, and the very nature of human potential. The twin story reminds us that some transformations, once begun, can never be reversed, and that the greatest sacrifices often create possibilities that extend far beyond the comprehension of those who make them. In an age where the boundaries between science and the supernatural grow increasingly blurred, the Carmichael twins stand as eternal guardians of secrets that may well determine the future of human consciousness itself.